Hello and welcome to the Essential Football Podcast. I'm Peter Smith and we have some really good games to get stuck into this week with Liverpool versus Man City, the headline act on Sunday afternoon on Sky Sports. We'll also be looking at whether Arsenal can build on their North London derby win when they go to Brighton on Saturday evening. And we preview Crystal Palace's match with a Leicester side yet to really get going in the Premier League so far this season. But first up, it's that big title race clash at Anfield, and I'm pleased to say I caught up with Sky Sports pundit Jamie Redknapp to discuss this one. And he had a rather nice outlook from where he was sat at St Andrews Golf Course. Jamie, you're playing at the Alfred Dunhill Links at the moment. I can see the old course behind you, a lovely spot there. I hope you're going better than some of our Ryder Cup side.
I don't know about that. Yeah, well, I'm showing off a little bit. Got the old course behind me. The first tee, I was teeing off in a couple of hours. Yeah, it should be fun. It's just a great week. There's so many people from sports, celebrity, business people, and yeah, to be involved, it's an incredible thing to do. I'm missing the football though this weekend as well, but lucky enough, I've got a weekend off, so I'll be watching the games on Sunday, and obviously there's a huge one, isn't there, with Liverpool and Man City. So looking forward to that. But while the football's not on, I can play a bit of golf.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a brilliant place to play golf as well. It looks fantastic. As you say, big head-to-head in the Premier League this weekend comes on Sunday at Anfield. The top two in the table. The top scorer is Liverpool against the best defence in Man City. And there's no doubt about it, Jamie, that this is a real important one in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Man City, you've looked at these fixtures and probably thought incredibly tough. Chelsea away, Paris Saint-Germain away and Liverpool away. People wondered how they were going to go about getting some results in these games. Obviously started the week really well against Chelsea. I thought they were fantastic. The way they pressed. They went back to a little bit what they did last year when they won there. And I think it was a bit of a game changer when they won the title because they hadn't had a good start to the season. I think there was a few questions about the system, how they were playing. And he'd been up playing with, I think, Kevin De Bruyne up front on that occasion. They pressed from the front. They showed tremendous energy. They dominated the ball. And I think that's one of the reasons why people talk about the press. But I think when he doesn't have a striker playing, I think he knows he's got so many people that are comfortable on the ball that he could dominate it. And that's always something that he's wanted to do in his Barcelona days, Bayern Munich days, and obviously his Man City days. And I think by not playing a striker, because sometimes with strikers, yes, they want to put the ball in the back of the net, but it's not, maybe they don't understand the role of being a midfield player. So you are going to get so much of the ball. They kept it away from Chelsea. They couldn't get it, and they pressed so well because there's so many midfield players that enjoy that part of the game. And it worked so well. And obviously the result in midweek against Paris Saint-Germain, that can happen because of the players that they've got and the quality with the likes of Messi. But I think he would have been delighted with the performance against Chelsea. And he'll look at it and go, let's maybe do the same again. And I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe plays the same system. It's very hard to second guess Pep Guardiola as a manager with his systems and how he plays. So I'm not quite sure what he'll do this weekend. It's going to be intriguing to find out.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, isn't it, Jamie? And I think it's one that's probably going to run throughout the season because when City play so well, as they did against Chelsea, you say, well, they don't need a number 9. They can play fantastic football like this. But then when they perhaps miss a few chances in a big game like PSG, you think, well, is that where someone like a Harry Kane might have made a difference for them? So where do you stand on that? Because I guess Pep Guardiola, this is how he wants to play the game, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that you have to be honest at the moment. It hasn't worked out for the two clubs, perhaps the way they're like. Man City wanted Harry Kane. I think they offered £130 million. It wasn't accepted. And I think it's to their detriment. I don't think they would be much better with Harry Kane. I think in certain games when it's tight, when you need a goal, when you need a magic moment from somebody, and no disrespect, Foden's a really good finisher. Kevin De Bruyne is a good finisher, but Harry Kane is an incredible finisher. And I do think that they will miss not having that outstanding number 9 long term. And that's why I'm not convinced they win the title this year. Of course, they've got every chance, but my money would be, I think, if you look at it right now, Chelsea and Liverpool will be slight favourites because they've got like sort of Salah that can go and get you 25 goals. I don't know anybody in that team that's going to do that for Man City right now. But that's not to say they can do it because they did it last year, and I would never be so stupid to rule out anything with this Man City side. They've got so many good players, but Chelsea obviously got Lukaku, and that's a brilliant signing as well, though he's going to be a little bit hit and miss, but you can guarantee 20 Premier League goals. So I think that's where they might miss out, and that's what Pep Guardiola realised. That's why he tried to buy Harry Kane. That's why they needed a number 9. They couldn't get one, but they will still go so close because they've got so many great players. And of course, they could even win the league. But I don't think it's worked out for Tottenham either. Keeping him, you can see that. I think Harry had obviously, his mind had gone. He thought he was going to be going to play at Man City. But listen, that's life. You have to get on with it now. And so do Man City. And they'll look at that Chelsea result last week and go, look, we can play without a striker. We can win the title. We did it last year. There's no reason why we can't do it again.
Yeah, sure. And when we talk about forwards, Liverpool's forwards filled their boots against Porto in the Champions League on Tuesday night. Salah got a couple. Firmino got a couple. Mane got one as well. They scored 3 times in each of their last 6 games in all competitions, Liverpool. So what's going so well for them in that department?
I can honestly say, Peter, and I've seen a lot of Mo Salah, watched him closely. I think he's playing as well as I've ever seen him. I think he looks so hungry, because obviously they're with some players that score so many goals, and maybe they don't do the other side of the game as well. But Mo Salah's all-round game right now is phenomenal. His work rate, his desire, his goals, his assists. I haven't seen him in better form. And there's obviously, his contractual situation's interesting. You sometimes find that with players. But I think he's in the form of his life. He looks strong, confident, and he's got the bit between the teeth. And I think he's enjoying the fact of having the likes of Virgil van Dijk back. And he knows he's now playing in a team this season that can win the title again. And he is in wonderful form. It's a joy to watch him. In every aspect of his game, there's not a weakness right now. Perhaps I'm sure probably thinking that, maybe that chance against Brentford last week when he could have took the game away from make it 4-2 game over. But apart from that, he's been clinical. He's been in brilliant form, but his all-round game, work rate, I think he is, as I say, he's in the form of his life right now.
Yeah, 8 goals in 8 games so far this season for Mo Salah, certain to be a big threat on Sunday. Behind that attack for Liverpool, Jamie, Curtis Jones impressed again in midfield against Porto. Now, last time I think we had you on this podcast, you were singing the praises of Harvey Elliott. Of course, he got that disappointing injury. But Jones is another young player who's stepped up for Liverpool this season and shown that he's capable of doing it on the big stage. As a former midfielder yourself, what do you admire about his performance in the centre of the park?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Curtis Jones. I love the way he plays. He can score goals. He's got good energy, works hard for the team. And in a way, I'm sure, like all players, maybe his nose was put out of joint a little bit when Harvey Elliott was starting against him. He probably thought, with Gini Wijnaldum going, this is a big opportunity for me. So he's had to wait. And obviously with somebody getting injured, give him an opportunity. And he's certainly taken it. He's very good in midweek. Against Brentford, he took his goal well. And in football, I think, especially as in midfield players, sometimes, you need the recognition only comes when you score goals. You might have a really good game, but no one talks about you in the press. You don't really hear too much about someone's performance. And sometimes you have a game where you don't actually play that well, but you score and everyone's now talking about you. It gets your confidence up. And I can see with Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott, when he comes back, Liverpool got some really good young players coming through. Obviously Harvey was signed from Fulham, but Curtis is a local lad, and that's always what the Liverpool fans like to see. So I'm very impressed with what the players and the options they've got is brilliant right now. So Liverpool are looking, I like the look of them. I really do. And, at the start of the year, people were talking about title contenders, and you can't rule this Liverpool side out. Whether they win it is, obviously it remains to be seen. But the players they've got, if they keep them fit, and obviously having Virgil back and the confidence that he gives them, they look fantastic right now.
Yeah. Interesting to see if Curtis Jones does start on Sunday. Obviously, midfield battle is going to be key, isn't it, in this one? It felt like Chelsea's midfield 3 just never really got to grips with City last weekend at Stamford Bridge with Rodri, De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva controlling the ball. So how do Liverpool ensure that they don't fall into the same trap and so get some of the ball off this Man City side, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, what Man City did really well in that game is you have to, and it's easier said than done, because if you looked at videos of Chelsea, you would go, okay, we've got to stop the person that controls the game mostly for them, and that's Jorginho. And every time the ball goes to him, get round him, make him play at a pace that he doesn't feel comfortable with doing. But again, it's tough to do that because he's got such great peripheral vision. He always knows that the next pass is going to go, like all good midfield players, and he just manages to somehow move out of trouble, which is an art form. And that's what they did well, because you got Kevin De Bruyne around. Now, Liverpool will not play the same way as what Chelsea will. Liverpool will probably, at times, if they try to press them, will probably miss out that press because they do play a bit more direct. Liverpool play more long balls than say what Chelsea will right now, because it's working for them. When you've got the pace up front, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes with Firmino this weekend because of what he can do and getting in and around, and he does such a great job defensively, although Jota's done a brilliant job as well. But I think that we know with Salah and Mane and whoever it is, because you've got the two options, Firmino or Jota, but I think you might go Firmino, and you've got to make sure that you don't let that, because you have to accept when you play Man City, they are going to have maybe 60% of the possession because they're brilliant at it. So you have to be calm. You don't have to, you don't panic. You don't start chasing, running out of positions because they will cut you open. And this game has been proven over many years, certainly at Anfield. Before, obviously, we didn't have crowds. There were some incredible matches that could have gone either way. Liverpool blew them away for stages, and then Man City would come back into it, and they could have ended up 4-4. They had that sort of feel about them. So this game is one that is, I cannot wait for it because of the whatever Pep Guardiola does, whether he plays with a striker or not, and he will look at this as a different proposition because of, he'd have had to figure out Chelsea because under Tuchel they have started to get the better of them. But under Jurgen Klopp's team, they give you a different problem. So he might feel he needs a Fernandinho in there just to protect that back four a little bit more so that you can't, because obviously Liverpool are going to be a bit more direct, someone to protect them. So there's so many different options and different ways to play for Pep. And I don't see that they will do the same thing or certainly press as high from the front because they know Liverpool at times are happy to go a little bit longer and turn you around and get Salah in behind. And that's something that I'm sure they'll be trying to do with this Man City defence the weekend.
Yeah, interesting tactical battle between two top managers, isn't it? Yeah. City obviously won 4-1 at Anfield in February. And, as you've said on this podcast so far, Liverpool in a very different place to where they were then. So how do you see it going on Sunday? Which way would you call it?
It's, you know what, Peter, this is one of those games where I think from Liverpool's point of view, having that confidence boost of those goals. And I think from Man City's point of view, they've had two really tough games. And I think Pep might have to shuffle his pack. The sharpness won't probably be there. He'd love to, just even if he'd got a point against PSG. I have a feeling that Liverpool win this game. I think that the confidence running through the veins of the team. I think, as I said before, Salah's in the form of his life. And I do believe that he'll cause this Man City defence unbelievable problems. They'll try to take it back because the fullbacks will want to run the other way. But if you do that and you leave that space in behind for Salah, I think he can cut open this Man City defence. Obviously, they're great with Laporte and Diaz. But it's that scenario I genuinely believe right now, if you were playing this Liverpool team, keep giving the ball to Salah. Keep making him, keep asking him to turn him, running in behind, because teams can't live with him right now. So I am going to go up to people who say, well, of course you're going to say it but I like to think that I'm pretty neutral on these occasions. But I think that Liverpool right now, with having the fixtures have been slightly kinder to them, I'm going to go for a Liverpool win this weekend.
Yeah, and Salah's got 4 goals in his last 5 against City at Anfield. So another good omen for Liverpool supporters ahead of the weekend. And it's Liverpool versus Man City on Sunday at 4:30 on Sky Sports. Jamie, thanks very much for joining us today, and go and enjoy your golf.
Thanks, Peter. I look forward to it. Take care, mate.
Welcome back to the Essential Football Podcast with me, Peter Smith, and I'm now joined by senior football writer Gerard Brand. How you doing, GB?
Yeah, very well. Been training for the London Marathon and petrified for Sunday, but looking forward to the end of the race and hopefully hearing about a Villa win up the road at Spurs. So yeah, all good.
Absolutely. Jamie Redknapp's out on the golf course and you're out pounding the streets, running hard, those final few miles before the big day.
Yeah, got a 20-minute run and a lovely 10-minute run on Saturday, which pales in significance to the other runs. So, yeah, really looking forward to it. Should be a good day, good event.
Good stuff. Well, good luck, mate. Hope that all goes well. And we've also got Simeon Golem on the line, EFL editor. How you doing, Simeon? Yeah, we've got a marathon this weekend. Any big sporting exploits?
No, very much not. I'm actually going to Stag in Newcastle this weekend, which is about as far from a marathon as I think it can possibly get. There will be no running involved at all. Delighted to be here for the first time since the rebrand. Was very excited to find out there was a league above the Championship, and that's where Fulham and Norwich always go for a year or two before ending up back where I'm covering them. So, it's a thrill.
Excellent. Well, a team who haven't been in your territory for a little while now, Brighton. We'll start with them because they've got Arsenal on Saturday at 5:30 on Sky Sports. They obviously missed the chance to go top of the Premier League, didn't they, on Monday night? They did manage to rescue a draw against their rivals Crystal Palace with that late Neil Maupay goal. Simeon, they've won 4 of their first 5 games before that in the Premier League. And I think it's took them something like 21 games to do that last season in the Premier League. So it's obviously been a fantastic start. So what's behind that, do you think, for Graham Potter's side? Are they doing anything differently this time round to what they've done previously?
I mean, there's been an element of fortune about a couple of wins. There was obviously the late win against Brentford. There was the interesting decisions against Leicester, so we say, which helped them out quite a bit. I think it's just a case of better finishing has helped us so far. Neil Maupay always starts the season fairly well, gets a few goals, and for everyone who's watching MNF would have seen a graphic they put up where they sort of referenced how different Brighton and Palace's XG were when they played each other last season. Brighton had something like 45 attempts, scored 3 goals. Palace had like 8 attempts, scored 4 goals, something like that. Brighton's finishing has always been a miss. It's been a lot better so far, and that is the reason essentially why more points are coming, because the goals are going in, whereas they weren't last season. Whether they keep that up that will remain to be seen, but right now it seems to be going very well for the side.
Yeah, of course, it is early days in this season, and we've seen plenty of times before where teams make good starts and then fade away. And Graham Potter made that point after the game Monday night. He said he feels like this Brighton team, can still improve, can still be better than what they've shown already this season. Over the past few years, despite sort of changing their style under Potter, despite a lot of metrics going in the right direction for them, they've always still ended up finishing in a similar position over the last few years. So what could they realistically achieve this season? What's a real goal for them, do you think?
I think top half would be incredible for Brighton in terms of progression, and the teams that have spent so much money to push towards the 7 or 8, they're realistically, unless you have a mad season like Burnley had a few years ago and a few other teams fall away, getting to sort of 8th, 9th or 10th is kind of really the next step, having a really comfortable season to just sort of push on from there. So yeah, anything above 10th would be remarkable. Even 12th, 13th, anything higher than what Brighton have managed so far would just be progression, really.
Yeah, not looking over their shoulder in the second half of the season and worrying about returning to your sort of sphere in the Championship and the relegation. Gerard, obviously, Brighton come up against an Arsenal side with a real spring in their step, don't they, after that North London derby. Thrashing of Tottenham, I think it's fair to say. We know the power confidence can have for a team, and the Gunners are going to be full of belief now, aren't they, in Mikel Arteta and what they can achieve right now.
Yeah, I think for the first time this season, Pete, we're seeing a solid outfit from Arsenal. Most importantly, we're seeing consistency in their personnel. I think the criticism thrown at Arteta was always that he didn't know his best 11, and it feels like for 18 months Arsenal just had this awful knack of allowing very average players back into their starting 11 for a handful of games. Of course, this season that was down to injury and COVID at the start, but there is a sign of a spine there now. I think the narrative has completely changed around Aaron Ramsdale. Penny for Bernd Leno's thoughts, of course, and Ben White and Gabriel look to have an understanding in central defence, and White is showing why he cost that little bit more, because his distribution is excellent. And Tomiyasu looks like he's been playing in the Premier League for 5 years, not 5 minutes. For me, a lot of depends on their central midfield. I think keeping Thomas Partey fit will be really key. And Arteta did put a lot of faith in Granit Xhaka putting him back into the team after a suspension. And of course, now he's injured, but I think Thomas Partey there is massively key. He had that run of games at the end of last season, and he's injured at the start of this season, and now he's getting a run of games as well at the moment. But we're talking about a spine in Arsenal's team now, rather than players coming in and out all the time, and that's all you can ask for, really. And Arteta hasn't had that, and that consistency in selection will hopefully lead to results for them.
Yeah, well, obviously having those players back has had a transformation really on their starts of the season. They lost their first 3 in the Premier League, and then they won the next 3. Only 2 teams have ever done that before in the Premier League history: Wimbledon and West Brom. If you want to roll that one out in the pub tonight, or on the stag do maybe, Simeon, that's a nice little fact to impression mates.
I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear it.
So Gerard, when you talk about those sort of aspects, it feels to me like you're suggesting that, yes, obviously they could be pumped up for a North London derby at home and deliver against what was a poor Tottenham side on the day, but there's elements there which suggest that there's good times ahead for Arsenal, and they're actually building something more longer term than just flash in the pan results like that one we saw last week.
Yeah, Sunday was a sort of odd one. I think we should be careful not to perceive a terrible Spurs' performance as a sensational Arsenal one. It was very much a case of both on Sunday because Spurs were dreadful. But what this was more than anything was a great day to be an Arsenal fan, a great day to be an Arsenal player and an Arsenal manager. Nothing gives you a boost quite like a derby win, particularly in that fashion. I haven't seen the Emirates bouncing like that for a long, long time. I'd probably say it's the best it's been since the Wenger era in terms of noise and encouragement on that day. I think 3 early goals help, of course, but what I loved is actually how Smith Rowe and Martin Odegaard fit into this system quite nicely together. When they signed Odegaard permanently in the summer, there was a bit of concern as to where Smith Rowe would play because last season one would often be sacrificed for the other, or on a couple of occasions one would be stuck too far out wide in an area where they couldn't influence the game. But it's really worked recently, and even Aubameyang's smiling. Even Aubameyang's happy how this is going. He's getting chances created. He is working hard. Yes, they're winning, and that helps. But yeah, we're seeing solidity there, but we have seen this from Arsenal before. We've seen a couple runs of wins, and then he returns to a crisis again. But for me, that consistency in selection and personnel is going to be key.
Yeah, obviously away from home this weekend at the Amex, and Simeon, last season's game between these sides at the Amex rather summed up Brighton's season last year, didn't it, with them dominating the first half, not taking their chances, and then Lacazette coming off the bench and scoring with pretty much his first touch. They'll be hoping, I guess, that former gunner Danny Welbeck can give them a little bit more cutting edge this time around. He's scored in each of his last 3 Premier League games against Arsenal across his times with Man United and Watford, so does have a bit of history against his former side, but it feels to me like he's going to play an important role for Graham Potter this season if, and that's the big question, if they can keep him fit.
I mean, yeah, we saw him hobble off on Monday night late on, didn't we? So there's question marks over whether he's going to start on Saturday. You hope he will. You really hope he will, because as you said, he has a great record against Arsenal. Obviously, Arsenal fans won't want him to. I'm talking from a Brighton perspective here. The problem with Brighton, as it has been for the last couple of years, is the squad is quite thin. The starting 11's good, and you saw on Monday night without Basuma. Obviously, he's probably Brighton's standout player in terms of quality, but how much they missed him in midfield. They let Palace dominate that game because they didn't have him. Last season, Ben White probably would have stepped into that role if Basuma wasn't there, but obviously they didn't have that. So if he's not there on Saturday, then that will be a worry for Brighton as well, depending on if he's fit or not. Welbeck again. You have Mopai, of course, who said sometimes he looks like he's going to score 25 goals a season. Sometimes he looks like he can't hit a barn door. So it all depends on sort of these little variables for Brighton, how well it can go against a team like Arsenal. But what I can guarantee is Brighton will put a lot more pressure on Arsenal's midfield than Tottenham did on Sunday. That is a guarantee. It just is. It will be a completely different test altogether, because they won't just open the floodgates and let them fly through at will, essentially. So it will be a much sterner test for Arsenal than Spurs was, which is a strange thing to say, but that's where we are now, isn't it? So,
yeah, how do you see it going then, Simeon?
I am going to go for a draw. A lot depends. I need to see Brighton starting 11. I'm pretty sure we'll know 10 of Arsenal starting 11. It just depends on who he puts alongside Thomas Partey in midfield. Other than that, the team will be the same as last week. Brighton, it depends who is fit on Saturday evening to start. If Basuma's playing, if Welbeck's playing, I fancy a draw. If not, it could go the way of Arsenal. But right now, I'm going to feel confident for Brighton and say 1-1.
Gerard, would you go along with that? Quite a tight game between these two, potentially?
I'm going Arsenal, but draw no bet for me. It's funny because Potter said to Sky recently that although the team are on their best ever run in the Premier League, points-wise, results-wise, that they have had much better runs of performance where the results didn't come, the goals didn't come. I think, as Simeon correctly said, this will be a tougher test for Arsenal than last Sunday against Spurs. And although I think the three of us would probably be more of a tougher test for Arsenal than Spurs were last weekend. I'm going for Arsenal, yeah, draw no bet Arsenal. Especially
with you providing the legs in midfield, Gerald.
I was going to say, if you're doing the running, then 100%. Other than that, no, I'm not going to be a threat to anyone at 5:30pm on Saturday.
I've never been called the engine man in a football team ever, so I'll take that. Yeah.
Simeon, just before we move on, I spoke to Graham Potter before the start of the season about Ben White's transfer, and I think, I can clearly remember his reaction was that he was actually proud that they'd been able to sell this player for £50 million, a player who they'd developed and sort of worked hard to improve. They'd obviously got good performances out themselves, but he saw it as a credit to the club that they could produce a player like this and generate that sort of money for him. And he was almost excited as well for Ben White to move on to his next challenge. So how do you think the Brighton supporters will react to his return this weekend?
I think they'll be fairly positive about it. I think the more sensible Brighton fans will be aware that it is hard to turn down a move to a club like Arsenal in whatever state they were in during the summer, and it was such good money for the club that it made sense for everyone. It would have been a crazy amount for Brighton to turn down, considering how strong Brighton's defensive options, even without him, are in terms of Dunk, Webster, and obviously Duffy, who's come back in. So I think you're always going to get a few boos when a player leaves a club. That's just normal. But I think it will be, I think the reaction towards him will be fairly good. I think it is good to see him doing well at Arsenal in the last few games as well, after the stick he got for the performance against Brentford, especially after we've seen what Ivan Toney has done to defenders since, especially Joel Matip, and to some extent, but not quite as much, Virgil van Dijk against Liverpool on Saturday. I think he's going to cause a lot of centre-backs a lot of problems this season. I think Ben White almost needs a bit of reflection on that performance and say he was probably left too exposed by the rest of the team on that night, and he will go on to be a very good signing for Arsenal, whether he justifies the £50 million or not eventually. Judge for yourself how much the money's worth, but I think he is a definite upgrade on what they had before, and him and Gabriel do look like the makings of a great partnership.
Well, we'll see how he gets on. Return to the South Coast on Saturday night. It's Brighton versus Arsenal, 5:30 kickoff on Sky Sports. Okay, stick with us, because in part 3 of this podcast we're going to be talking about Crystal Palace and their match with Leicester. Welcome back to the Essential Football Podcast with me, Peter Smith, and I'm still joined by Simeon Golem and Gerard Brand. Now, we just heard about Brighton's dramatic equaliser on Monday night against Crystal Palace. Obviously, Palace on the other side of it, they felt they were so close to what would have been an important victory over their rivals. And Gerard, they had been showing signs of improvement, haven't they, under Patrick Vieira? I guess they did again for 90-odd minutes on Monday. How much of a hammer blow was that, do you think, for them to concede that goal from Neil Mobile late on?
Yeah, it was a blow in a sense that you want to knock your rivals off their momentum. But although they didn't go top, I think Brighton celebrated it like it was a win, and a last-minute derby draw does indeed keep that momentum up. But they went for it, Palace, and I actually saw a fair bit of positivity on social media from Palace fans after the game, which is usually unheard of if you concede a last-minute goal in a derby to draw. But across 2 games against Brighton last season, they had 3 shots, and in the first half alone against Brighton this time round they had 7. I think that there is a change in feeling here at Palace, and I think the fans are excited to watch their team again. Coincided with fans being let back in the stadium. I think the atmosphere at Selhurst Park deserves a good, entertaining team, and while I'm not certain that's actually going to improve their average league position by much, I think the fans would often take a better watch than an extra place in the Premier League table. So yes, a blow, but I think there's a bit of positivity at Palace at the moment. Yeah,
and another standout performance, Simeon, from Conor Gallagher. He obviously won the penalty for Palace's goal. Just 21 years old, and almost every time I've seen him play this season, he's really caught the eye. What do you think Thomas Tuchel might be thinking when he sees these kind of displays from the Chelsea loanee?
I mean, he has been brilliant, hasn't he? And there was a lot of talk on the social last night about, after Chelsea's defeat against Juventus, about how much creativity they were lacking and the players they were putting on. Loftus-Cheek came on, Barkley came on, and you think if those two were involved in the squad, there's every chance that Gallagher could have been involved this season as well. I feel like he did need another Premier League loan move, though, because West Brom last season didn't quite work out for him how he would have hoped, in terms of the team was struggling for a lot of the season. He played well in fits and bursts. It just wasn't. It's not easy going on loan to a team that's struggling at the bottom for most of the season to try and excel and impress and do your best when you're sort of trying to produce backs to the wall performances. He was brilliant in the Championship when I used to watch him there as well for Charlton and then Swansea. And as we know now, there is much more of a way into the Chelsea first team for youth players than there was a couple of years ago. Obviously, Lampard opened that door. He's continued it. Obviously, Chalobah's made a bit of an impression for Chelsea this season from the youth setup. So he will be watching, he will be impressed, and he'll probably wish there was a part of him that had him at his disposal this season to bring on every so often. You saw Thierry Henry on M&F was just waxing lyrical about him. He thought he was absolutely brilliant. I'd agree. I thought he was exceptional on Monday night. And I mean, if he'd gone there when Hodgson was there, he might have been sort of shoved out on the left and the right and made to do a lot of running and tracking back and this and that. But now he really is given the chance under Vieira to show what he can do, and he's excelling in the Premier League. He's one of the standout midfielders in the league this season, I'd argue.
I sort of hope we don't have another. And I know they're letting more youth into their team. I think Gallagher's future should be away from Chelsea. I think he needs to play every week. I don't think he we talk about Loftus-Cheek and Barkley maybe coming off the bench, and there's the example of Chalobah getting games, and also Mason Mount, who's one of the first names on the team sheet now. I would just love to see Gallagher play every week from now on and not have to take that half step back to potentially go 2 forward. I think he's. I don't know how to get out of Chelsea. I think it's quite difficult, and they renew your contracts and they try and sell you on for millions, and that's the model that they use, and it's the model that Man City use and other teams use as well. But I'd hate to see him become an average player who gets a game every 2 weeks for Chelsea or gets half a game every 2 weeks for Chelsea. But that's difficult because you back yourself. He will back himself to get into that team next season or whenever it is. But I'd hate to see his development stunted because we've seen it so many times with English players at top clubs. And 1 in 4 get through, 1 in 3 get through, but the other 2 or 3, it's such a shame.
I do agree that he shouldn't go back. I just think he could go back. I wasn't saying that he'd definitely.
I'd agree with that. Yeah,
but it's just, as you said, he would get games to Chelsea. I do agree he should go and play, and I think there is. Lamptey, Mark Guay for Palace as well has proved there is a way out of Chelsea if you want to get out. I think some just don't really want to leave, and obviously at that stage, the most important thing is he's playing games every week. When he came to Charlton at the start a couple of seasons ago in the Championship, I couldn't believe he'd never played a senior game before, which is mad when you think. He was 19, I think. And that's young, but there are sort of 17, 18-year-olds who've played 50, 100 games at that point, and that is just the most important thing to do. And he does need to do that. But as it stands, I think he would be involved in Chelsea's squad this season. But obviously he's better off at Palace playing somewhere where he would play every week, because we've seen how other players have had their development stunted by just not playing at all.
Yeah, I think Loftus-Cheek's an interesting example, isn't it? Because obviously he was on loan at Crystal Palace as well, and sort of appeared to benefit from a run of games there, but once he went back to Chelsea again, he's sort of been on the fringes. So interesting to compare those two players perhaps later in the season, once Gallagher is maybe again thinking about his next move, whether that's back to Chelsea or another loan move at the end of next season. But I guess, Gerard, under Patrick Vieira, there's not many better former midfielders to learn your trade under, is there? No. What do we make to his start as a Premier League manager?
Yeah, I was speaking to a Palace fan recently, and they said the difference in style is chalk and cheese, and the expected goal stats would back that up. We mentioned that they have had the fewest shots on target of the Premier League this season, but relative to them, their XG per game is up nearly 40% compared to last season. So in relative terms, Palace fans are really enjoying this, and Palace and their fans, I think, needed a refresh, something to revitalise them. And last season, they put a banner up at the training grounds towards the end of Hodgson's reign, calling it a pandemic of apathy. I do wonder how fast these players will gel into a proper side. But one thing I'd say is I bet Vieira is really looking forward to Eze returning from injury, whether that's just before the new year or after, because Eze will be watching these games and the style of play. They're opening it up a bit more. He'll be licking his lips because it will really suit him. But yeah, the difference is just massive, and I think it's just what Palace needed. I actually don't think they'll go down this season, and it's been a positive start for them, and the fans are being entertained. What more do you want?
Yep, and they take on Leicester this weekend, this Sunday, Simeon. A Leicester side who, in fact, to me, after their FA Cup win at the end of last season, obviously finished up 5th again in the Premier League, and then beat Man City in the Community Shield ahead of the start of this campaign. It felt like there was a lot of positivity going into this season, building on that again, what they could achieve this year. 2 wins from 6 games in the Premier League. It's not the worst start in the world, but it's not ideal. And I saw Brendan Rodgers has been talking about the team not quite being at its level so far, needing some of those new signings to gel. We're speaking ahead of their Europa League game on Thursday night against Legia Warsaw, so we'll see how that goes. But is there a danger, perhaps, that Leicester could get a little bit left behind in the Premier League this season, given the standards that we're seeing at the top end of the division now?
It is early days, and they do tend to start really well and then tail off, don't they? So maybe it might just be the other way around this season, you don't know. But it does look like it's going to be harder to force their way into the top 4 this season. It has for the last couple of seasons when they haven't managed it anyway, due to, obviously, Liverpool had their problems last season and this, that and the other. Leicester's squad has a strange look to it. It has a strange balance. Obviously, they've got Vardy, who just won't stop. He won't. Every season you think, oh, maybe when you look at his age, you think this is the season where he's going to dip. But he's changed his game, and he's still invaluable to the side. And that means they can't really get Iheanacho. And even though every time Iheanacho's in, he seems to play well. And if they try to go two up top, then where do they get Harvey Barnes in? Obviously, James Maddison's form's dipped as well. They don't seem to have a proper sort of option on the other side yet as well. So it's just, obviously, Fofana was a big injury miss at the start of the season. They're back. Johnny Evans has just come back to fitness. Söyüncü doesn't look like a proper defender without Johnny Evans next to him, to be honest. They've got two great right backs in Castagna and Ricardo. And on the other side, the options aren't as strong. Obviously, Bertrand, who hasn't been great, has sort of been in and out at the start. And obviously, they're waiting for James Justin to come back. But then you could argue he's a right back as well. So it's all a bit higgledy-piggledy at the moment for Leicester. He doesn't seem to be able to get his best team. He doesn't seem to know what his best formation is to get his best players in there. And then you have to question the recruitment of who they've been signing and why, if those options are there and those problems are there.
Yeah, it's a talented squad, isn't it? But as you say, perhaps just fitting the pieces in the right place will be Rodgers' real challenge this season if they are to improve on what they've done in recent seasons. And let's make no mistakes about it. The last couple of seasons have been great for Leicester. I know the frustration of dropping out of the top four in the final moments, but to be competing with those teams on a regular basis, given the respective budgets, that's great credit to him as a manager and also to his players and the talent they've got in that squad. And Gerald, I guess with Jamie Vardy revitalised, there's always hope for Leicester, because after his hernia operation last winter, he did struggle for form, didn't he? I think he scored just 2 goals after Christmas until the final day when he got a couple against Tottenham. But he has 5 goals and an assist already this season. He put away 2 trademark finishes in the draw with Burnley, as well as his own goal earlier in the game. Speak less about that. But it does seem like he's got back to his best.
Yeah, I think Leicester were trying to dominate the ball more last season because, and become a side that controls the game, which on the face of it probably isn't what suits our traditional idea of Jamie Vardy, which is running in behind from a ball down the channel or on the shoulder. But his 2 goals against Burnley were exactly that, running in behind, Leicester breaking the lines and finding Vardy early doors right on the last defender. He's still one of the best at that, but his other goals this season have actually been quite opportune, striker goals, good movement, anticipating where the ball might go, and it'd be interesting to see if he does keep Iheanacho out of the team much longer, because obviously there was a lot of love for Iheanacho at the end of last season. But Leicester, they're still seeing lots of the ball now, particularly at home, because sides will go to them and sit. But I liked what I saw on Saturday actually against Burnley with Ademola Lookman and Harvey Barnes flanking Vardy and Tielemans actually playing a bit further forward in a 4-3-3. Tielemans is just still an excellent playmaker, and if they can sort that defensive issues out, the personnel, I do think they'll improve quickly, and I still think they'll be in and around there at the top.
Well, it's certainly going to be a sort of stiff examination for the defence this weekend when Zaha rocks up against them. He's been involved in 8 goals in 12 Premier League games against Leicester, more than any other side in the competition, so he does like it against the Foxes. He's currently on 49 Premier League goals, so chance of a landmark this weekend. And he has really started the season well, doesn't he? He looks so exciting every time he gets on the ball at the moment. Yeah.
I think, as I said earlier, when Eze comes back, he'll get it from both flanks as well. And I think Zaha, he's an interesting player because he could have made that move. He could have made that massive move to a top 4 club, or he's linked with Arsenal every summer, wasn't he? But yeah, just he's got this passion that just seems to link up with the Palace fans and the Palace team fantastically, and I love watching him. I think we all love watching him, and I think he's one of the players actually that's going to reap the rewards of this Vieira style more than anyone. So
how do you see it going, Gerard? What's your prediction for Palace versus Leicester?
I'm going for a draw. I'm going to be really boring and go for a draw. I had initially thought of a Palace win, but I've sort of convinced myself that Leicester will become strong at some point this season, so I'm going for a draw.
What are you saying, Sim?
Again, we're talking about this before. Leicester play on Thursday night, so it'll be interesting to see how strong Rodgers goes on Thursday night in the Europa League to then take a team into Sunday. I'm going to go for a Palace win. I think they showed enough on Monday, despite the late disappointment, that they can really, really trouble Leicester on Sunday. I think they'll have a right go at their back four. I think their sort of pace and energy and movement in those positions will cause them real problems. I think Conor Gallagher will cause real problems in those sort of gaps in around sort of between the defence and the midfield. And I think Palace will win 3-1.
Oh, wow. A big shout. Talking Palace up here on this podcast. Crystal Palace versus Leicester at 2:00 on Sunday. Let's see if they can match these boys' expectations. Simeon, Gerard, thanks very much for joining us on the Essential Football Podcast this week.
Cheers, Pete.
Okay, so that just leaves us with time to run through this weekend's Premier League games. And Man United take on Everton at the lunchtime game on Saturday at 12:30. That should be a good one before the 3:00 come into play. It's Burnley versus Norwich, Chelsea against Southampton, Leeds take on Watford, and Wolves face Newcastle. Then we have that Sky Live, Brighton versus Arsenal at 5:30 on Saturday night, as we spoke about earlier in the podcast. Into Sunday, and Crystal Palace take on Leicester at 2:00 on Sky Sports, while at the same time Tottenham face Aston Villa and West Ham are up against Brentford. And then 4:30, the big one, Liverpool versus Manchester City at Anfield, live on Sky Sports Premier League. Make sure you don't miss it. That's going to be a really fascinating contest, and it's going to round off the weekend's action. Remember, you can catch the Essential Football Podcast review show on Monday morning to find out how that all plays out. But until next time, enjoy your football.